Shalom, everybody. It's a pleasure and wonderful for me to go to this experience because everybody in life has a story. And when you reach 70, you're blessed by the Bible. By 80, you're doubly blessed. And to reach what I have, God willing, I'll soon be 90, I am doubly, triply blessed. I thank God for every minute. I think it's been a wonderful life, and we all have a story to tell. Some a little bit more interesting than others, some more troubles than others, but I think as a whole, as a family, from the three people that came to America, I think in a whole, the Hankins have done very, very well here. We've grown from the Hankins, from my grandfather's grandfather, who started a circle, more or less that's how far back in history we go. I think it's about 1820. Chaim Leber Gershon was my grandfather, and his grandfather's name was Zelig. And no, his name was, I'm wrong, it was Chaim. And he had a brother Zelig, and there's the two of them that grew up in Parich. My uncle, my great-grandfather had a bar, a shank they called it, and his brother was in the army. And from these two brothers, of course the Hankin plumbers is a part of that family, and we are the tailors and the shoemakers. And Zadie had his father was Chaim, he was called Chaim Leber Gershon. So there was a Gershon in the family and Leber. And my grandfather, Sarah Rivka Gorelik Hankin, whose mother's family name was Strupinski, and is part of that family living in Detroit now. They were born in Parich. She was born in Parich, and he was raised in Schlubben. Now, Parich is a small town. It was burnt out, and people didn't know where they came from, so they took the name Gorelik, which means burnt out, and that's where the name Parich comes from. Now, there was a match made between Sora and Chaim, and they were married, and they had 8 children. And of course, I'll start off with my father, Zelig, the oldest. Then there was Chernet. Then it was Uncle Sal, who was, oh my God, I forgot his name right. Sal was Schneider Zalman. And then there was Uncle Sam, Shel Yitzchak. And then there was Morris, Mesha Aaron. And then there was Uncle Nathan, Nosson Notte, and then Bertha, who was Bedke. Oh, I forgot my Tante Rachel, Good Rachel. I think there's 8 there. And from that family, Bubby and Zadie had 25 great-grandchildren. Each one of them, some had 4, some had 3. My family had 4. Uncle Sam had 4. And Uncle Sal had 3. Uncle Morris had 2. Bertha had 3, and Tante Rachel had 2. Who did I forget? Uncle Morris had 2. I think I have them all now. If I made a mistake, you'll all forgive me. This is old age talking now. Anyway, the family grew up in Schlubben, which was my father's hometown. And then I must tell you this little story, how my mother comes into this picture so early in life. My father, Zelig, was a baby, and my grandmother, Bubba Sora, was rocking him in the cradle, and he started to cry. My mother's mother was Bracha, and she lived in Schlubben, and she heard my father from Yankiv cry. So she says to Bubba Sora, "Don't let him cry, he might be my son-in-law someday." And that was one part. I thought that was a cute story. Well, they were married, and life went on, and then, of course, I think I'm going to finish up with that part of the story before I go into the Gorelik family. The war broke out. My father met my mother. That's a beautiful story. My father was a tailor. He had traveled all over Europe, Sevastopol, Katrina Slav and all. And by the time he came home to be bar mitzvahed, and then he went, and Tante Lecherna opened up like a dress shop. She was about 14, and she already had her girls working under her. She was a wonderful dressmaker. And my mother, in her 16, 17, came to work for her, but she still hadn't met my father. My father had been out of the city, And one day, my mother's girlfriend in Kazimierov, Hi, isn't that awful? I can't even name. Hi, wait a minute. Anyway, I can't, it'll come to me. She and her husband went in Kazimierov, and they were getting married around Hanukkah time. So they called my father from Schlubin to come make his wedding clothes. So my father came in town on a Friday. He had supper at my grandmother's, Baba Brachas, my mother's mother's home, and there was 12 children, 11 children sitting around the table there. And he sat down and he started eating, and then he looked at my mother and more or less made his eyes at her, I guess. Saturday they went off to shul, and Sunday they spent the afternoon together, and he went home Sunday night. On Tuesday she got a proposal of marriage. So I thought that was a nice story. And then, I'll go back to the Hankins. Zadie here, Chaim was a tailor, and all his sons were tailors, more or less. And then, of course, when they came to America, Uncle Sal became a shoemaker, and Morris became a shoemaker, but that's another story. Anyway, the war broke out, and before the war broke out in 1912, my father, so when my father and mother met in Purim, at Hanukkah time, and in Purim, she got the proposal of marriage, and she got married, and she says, why anybody would do anything so fast she didn't understand today. She would have done that, actually. Anyway, thank God they lived to 60 years and 10 days before he passed away. But anyway, they got married, and my father wanted to come to America. In fact, I still have the Russian bank book that he sent back to America, to Russia, with $600 in it. And my mother's father was very upset. Yisrael Leib was very upset that they were going to America. So he said to my father, you didn't tell me you were going to America. So he says, well, I just decided I was going to go. I'll send back some money, and when I come back to Russia, I will open up a factory. Well, the money came. He started sending the money out. And no, so he was very upset, and he said, well, go to some good need. He was like the rabbi to get all kind of questions asked and answered. And they came to some good need, and my grandfather said to him, I don't want them to be married, to go to America. So their good deed says they love each other, that they're married, and that's their own life, and they should go to America. So they came over here, they got married on Purim, and then in October 25th, 1912, they came to America and landed at Locust Point on the ship Maine. And they came to South Baltimore. Later on, I'll show you pictures what happened to one of my mother's wedding dresses. She told me she got married in a blue dress, but what the story is was a black velvet dress. That's another story of our life. Anyway, they wound up in South Baltimore, and they went to my father's boyfriend's house, Ostrov. They lived at 610 or 68 South Hanover Street. And when they got there, my mother was very disappointed because she had gone to the big cities in Russia. She had worked in cities, and she had a girlfriend that they would go past the high school where the girls worked, and they would copy their uniforms and make it up themselves. People thought they had gone to high school. And they came to America, and my mother was supposed to work here. And the first day he came, his boyfriend, Mr. Nathan Ostrov, gave him the job of putting on a fur collar on a coat, and he gave him $1.50 for that. That was the first day in America. That was on this Friday, I think. Yeah, they came on a Friday. That must have been Saturday. But anyway, they had already gotten 2 rooms for it. They knew they were coming, and they got 2 rooms upstairs at Block's house at 629 South Hanover Street. And with them came my Uncle Sam Hankin, who was only not quite 16, and that's why he was able to come out on my father's and mother's passport. They picked the ship up in Bremen, and that took them 2 weeks of steerage. Oh, and by the way, with them came my mother had an uncle. That's another story. My mother had an uncle, Zelig, and he had a mother-in-law who's a widow. and she was afraid to come herself, so she came with my mother and slept with my mother in steerage. And my uncle was supposed to come, but his daughter got the measles, and they had to leave them in Bremen for the next ship. And with them, they brought $25. That's what they were allowed to bring into America. And this is where an Uncle Sam lived with them, and my mother found herself pregnant. She didn't go to work. And 9 months later, I had a sister, Pesha, and she passed away at 6 weeks because there was no one to take care of her. She had dysentery, and she passed away. Her name was Pesha. I found her grave after 85 years, 87 years. 2 years ago, I found her grave. It was a lot of work, but I made up my mind. I knew I had a sister somewhere, and I had to find out where she was, and I found it. It was a lot of Gestapo work, but I did it. I had a tombstone put up for her, and